End of July and commitments are happening so quickly that we're having to kind of change the plan as we jump into the show. It's Louisiana versus all y'all's Recruit That Boot. He's Sam Spiegelman. I'm Jarrett Roser. We're going to get into all of the movement, including a couple of new LSU commits at the top of this, and maybe some other guys to watch for LSU fans with some potential moves the rest of this month. Samuel, what's going on, man?
Man, just getting a chance to breathe. Been in the lab for 2 days doing recruiting rankings for updates in the 2025 and 2026 classes with rivals. On top of that, we had a whole seminar on different ways to present content in the year of 2024, which I know that you're very familiar with and probably better at it than I am, who's stuck in writing stories. But I'm expanding upon my repertoire and learn and continuing to grow, Jared, as I get older and get into this new world. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. For a second, I thought you were just saying I'm familiar with the year 2024. It was like, yeah, we're almost to August, so I've gotten my bearings about me a little bit.
At this point, you better be pretty familiar with the year because we're way closer to 2025 than we are to 2024. But I hear you.
Is when you talk about different changes of packaging of content and whatnot, and I think you and I both just going back to newspaper roots, I miss writing long features on who people are more than anything, probably as much as we have to do all the rankings and all that stuff. But is there anything that you telling people to kind of keep an eye out, or just sort of like what to expect moving forward? Or is that kind of quiet behind the scenes industry secrets for the moment?
Oh yeah, no, this is top flight industry secrets, but uh, God, I miss I in the recruiting side of things, I've definitely found a way or two to do like a feature or two every single year or so. I do find myself missing the dedication and the time and the amount of people you get to speak to for that, and real pros, right? Setting the scene, trying to make people feel how they felt in those moments. That's what originally drew me into this. But I do like, getting scoop all day, every day. That is, it's fun. I feel like the minor league version of Adam Schefter, where it's so low on to the high school level that like it doesn't matter. But it is fun. It's nonstop. This morning I logged a new Futurecast for one of the best quarterbacks in the country. So I did a 30-45 second clip on what I also wrote about. So us old heads, Jared, we still like the written content, and sometimes it's really popular, sometimes it isn't, as we kind of get a grasp on that, how to present that information in other ways, like a video, like a podcast, maybe even some graphics here and there, just, surmising the 450 words that, might have, taken the time to write. But some people just want to see it, get a grip and be like, all right, move on to the next thing. We're adjusting.
Well, Samuel Schefter the sixth. Let's jump right into some of this recent movement for LSU. We'll start with the in-state guy, even though there is, as we record this midday Wednesday, a fresh out-of-state commitment. But Jalan Chapman, a guy that we've both watched for a couple of years now, standout offensive lineman at Warren Easton down in New Orleans, who has played a variety of positions down there for the Eagles, and we kind of anticipate being an interior guy at the next level. He becomes the third New Orleans area commitment, or really, in the city of New Orleans commitment for the Tigers in that 2026 class, just over the span of a little more than a month. Thoughts on Jalan joining that early push in the city for the Tigers?
Yeah, not too surprising. I think Jalan has been leaning toward LSU pretty much since they elected to offer after having him work out and camp there as an underclassman last year. He really impressed Brad Davis. In that span, he put together just a great sophomore season, has continued to add to his frame. He's one of those innately strong players amongst linemen in the state for 2026. He's probably geared to be an interior guy, even though he's going to play some tackle for Warren Easton. But I like how nimble he is. I like how innately powerful he is. I like how smart he is. I like his leadership skills. He was flirting with the idea of going out to UCF last weekend, but instead made it back to LSU. There was some buzz that he was going to commit a little bit earlier in the summer. So to lock him in with Ja'Kai Anderson, with Richard Anderson, you just got to see who are the priorities for LSU. Who do they want to be the vocal leaders in their 2026 class, particularly in state, the same way that Harlem Berry and Keelan Moses were for LSU in 2025. And listen, Jalen Chapman, getting to know him and seeing him in a lot of different settings the past couple of years. He's a kid that grew up idolizing Cedric Van Pran, our guy. And I think if that's someone that you idolize and you're trying to model your game and your persona around, you're in pretty good shape over there.
Berger is probably one of the top guys that got out of Louisiana and went elsewhere that I would have loved for LSU to have landed. And, credit to him for everything he was able to do out there in Georgia and now starting off his NFL career. But two of those guys we just mentioned from the 26 class are trench guys on either side of the line. I think the 26 class has a really good crew of defensive linemen and offensive linemen in the state. And the job that Brad Davis the last couple of years has done taking the reins of that offensive line group, and Bo Davis now shoring up some of the instability in recent years of who's going to be the LSU defensive line coach from year to year. I mean, to the date we talked about the Anderson and Anderson law firm sounding names to start the 26 class. Davis and Davis in the trenches for LSU are doing a hell of a job for the Tigers recruiting and then also getting these guys ready on the field.
No question. I mean, Brad Davis, obviously a BR guy, has been pushing LSU for commitments for several recruiting cycles before he arrived back in his hometown of LSU. When he was at Arkansas, when he was at Florida, he was at Missouri, always giving LSU a run with the best offensive linemen. And it's been such an area, dating back to Cam Robinson. It's an area where LSU has missed on guys that they probably should not be missing out on from parts of the state. Like we said earlier, if you're in Louisiana, you should have a leg up on Louisiana guys, and LSU has not always had that. You saw the tide turning with guys like Emory Jones and Will Campbell, and that theme has continued to stick. Now, Brad Davis owns Louisiana. He's got real estate here. He continues to lock down the state, and what I've been impressed with his ability to go into neighboring states. I always call them kind of the country outside of Louisiana, but different parts of the SIP, East Texas, different parts of the state of Texas, and more metro areas. And he's done very, very well for the Tigers. And Bo Davis, I mean, give me a break. He nearly got Don McKinley when he was at Texas. He's been a thorn in LSU's side when he was at Alabama and Texas, getting him back home again in Louisiana. I remember, you remembered as well, during Don McKinley's announcement, they announced Bo Davis when they had Elijah Robinson and Frank Wilson on the, on the field. So Bo Davis is a legend in this state. You already see the work that he did to close out 2024, the early work kind of fixing a key part of the class in 2025 and now beyond.
In this 25 class, the Tigers today add the flip of one-time South Carolina commit Jadenbreaker, the versatile, long, his quickness on film stands out, but just really good, versatile linebacker, edge rusher from Georgia, a guy that was just down in Baton Rouge this past weekend as part of that Bayou Splash weekend that is paying early dividends with him and Jalen. And we wait to see, who else might join that momentum. Thoughts on an SEC flip for the Tigers to an area in terms of both the inside linebackers and edge rushers where they've got a really nice crew of a handful of guys now in that 25 class.
Yeah, credit Blake Baker. He's trying to, add some depth and add some young talent to that front seven. With Keelan Moses and CJ Ross out of Houston already committed. You kind of have your inside guys and your off the ball guys, but someone like Braker, a big, physical, raw, powerful, super incredibly athletic edge presence as like a stand-up rusher. That Blake Baker loves these kind of players, and LSU needs to pad their depth at this department. Blake Baker has a really great track record of going into the Southeast and parts of Georgia, South Georgia here, going into different parts of the Carolinas and recruiting guys and bringing them to LSU. You've seen that in before he went to Missouri and now since he's gotten back. And I think this is an area where LSU you can't add enough guys to try to pad their depth. And someone like Braker has a lot of physical upside, and that's what you want for guys to fly off the edge.
Speaking of areas where you love depth, and it's been nice to see LSU make some strides of late, with some of these commitments to the secondary, a new offer goes out to the hometown standout cornerback from Catholic High and Jacob Bradford, who also fits into this trend we've talked about all summer of Houston recruiting the state of Louisiana extremely well. Jacob is one of the four guys that's committed to the Cougars. And as good of a job as Willie Fritz and company have done hanging on to Rashad Sterling through the summer, now they've got to do their best to fight off the Tigers for the hometown Bradford. I mean, thoughts, initial reactions to that, a guy that he and his brother Blaine have obviously watched an awful lot of LSU football growing up a couple miles away from Tiger Stadium through the years. How tough of a battle is this going to be for Fritz and company to keep Jacob Bradford in that class now that the hometown Tigers are in the mix?
Yeah, and first off, notice the timing of this offer, Jared. This is the end of July, and Corey Raymond wasted no more time putting an offer on the table for Jacob. Someone that you would imagine they'd like to see the first couple weeks of the season if they were on the fence. But they wasted no time. We know that Jacob Bradford tested in the 4.4s when he worked out at Oregon. He's someone we know is a legitimate 6 foot, 190 some odd pounds. I thought he had a phenomenal year for Catholic last year. And, if you're talking about the DBs in the state of Louisiana, besides Jabari Antoine, it's Aiden Anding and Jacob Bradford. Those guys are at the top at a premium position. I love seeing LSU offer when they did. Now, do they have work to do? Believe me, they do. You talked about it earlier. Let me just piggyback. Houston has done great, not only evaluating the state of Louisiana. Obviously, Coach Fritz and his guys know this state very much from their time at Tulane, but they've recruited the heck out of Jacob Bradford and beat out not only a late push from Oregon, but Texas Tech for his commitment. And now they're going to have to hold off LSU. That staff has built a lot of rapport with the family, and I think Jacob was really comfortable when he decided to commit at the end of June. Of course, LSU is not far from home. They are not going to tread lightly. They're going to go all in, trying to get Jacob Bradford to commit as soon as possible. But I think they're going to have their work cut out trying to hold off Fritz. And I think it's going to be a similar theme with Rashad going into the fall.
Yeah, as you mentioned, I mean, the whole family has been excited about the opportunity there for Jacob out in Houston. I saw around the time of Jace Thomas's announcement, Stacy Bradford, Jacob and Blaine's dad was kind of joking that he needed his Spades partner Jace to end up coming to Houston too. Well, now there's an opportunity to reunite that Spades combo in Baton Rouge if Mr. Stacy wants to keep playing some cards with Jace and Jacob join that secondary with Corey and company. And also, why not keep with the theme of the Anderson and Davis and get Bradford and Bradford in some purple and gold, man. This is what the Tigers are doing now. They're finding pairs of talented people in their respective realms and getting them to kind of pair up with that roster and that coaching staff.
Well, you know what? You know what's different from this staff than previous staffs that we've seen in Baton Rouge over the last 10 or so years, Jared, is this staff is not afraid to believe in their own evaluations, even though that Jacob Bradford and Aiden Anding did not camp at LSU this summer. Both wound up with an offer after committing or nearly committing to other schools in the area. Jacob obviously did commit to Houston. Aiden Anding was very close to committing out of state at a certain point around the same time. And now you say that LSU is trending for Anding after the Bayou Splash. He's going to commit at some point before Rustin kicks off the year. And I like where LSU's sitting. And, they didn't wait to see what Jacob did as a senior. They didn't wait to see what Aiden did as a senior. They felt comfortable enough. And this has served LSU well in the past, believing in in-state guys. Before, any of these offers, these are guys that are in the top 20 in the state, no question. And LSU's championship teams have been founded on a lot of similar premises. So it's great to see BK and the staff realize that and make the moves when they did and, try to gain traction when they can to not fall too far behind in these recruitments.
We're getting off into a nice tangent here, and that's my fault. I fully acknowledge, but just a coincidence to me, the moment that I really went full tilt onto Jacob Bradford and Aiden Anding Island, so to speak, of feeling like they should be in the LSU secondary as much as I had liked them more and more throughout their high school careers, particularly Jacob. Aiden was more of a little bit of a meteoric rise the last year with his return to football, but both of them matching up against now LSU freshman tight end Tradez Green, who, look, he gave them their fair share of work because Trey is an absolute freak of a pass catching athlete, but the battles that they gave him to make him work at the high school level, the way that he had to work to get what he got against those guys, was really impressive to me, and I thought said a lot about their ability to match up with a top athlete on a national scale on a Friday night or Saturday night or whenever the state championship game was for Aiden, and battle a guy like Trey Dez, I thought was really impressive.
Yeah, you show me a lot of DBs who've had success slowing down trade as I'd like to shake their hands and sign them to my teams.
Yeah. Continuing. So we'll keep an eye on Jacob Bradford, obviously. There's some out of state commitments to keep an eye on the rest of this month that we already know some dates on. The 2026 quarterback, Faison Brandon, has LSU in his top 4 with a commitment coming on Saturday. We're not expecting that to be a purple and gold decision. We've talked a little bit about CJ Jim Coyley, who's a little bit more than a week away right now. Still, I think, like where LSU stands with the standout safety up in Tennessee. And now Jonah Williams, the phenomenal multi-sport athlete from right there in Galveston, Texas, who a lot of people had thought is probably A&M bound, or certainly A&M was well positioned with him. He's got an August 24th date set, and it seems like LSU has positioned itself extremely well to potentially pull him out of Texas. What's kind of the latest in terms of your feel on Jonah and the possibility of adding him to this 25 class? Because he would be a monster get.
Yeah, just a very fluid recruitment for Jonah, who not only is a phenomenal football player, whether you like him at safety or in the box as an outside linebacker, but he's a phenomenal baseball player, a multi-sport athlete. Oklahoma had a lot of momentum in his recruitment at one point because of they've won a ton of battles for multi-sport athletes like Jonah in the past. You've seen Oregon have its fun trending at the top with Jonah. And then you've seen Texas and LSU get a last couple of visits. Obviously, both not only great football programs bound in SEC territory and close to home in Galveston, but also phenomenal baseball programs. Jonah just on campus this past weekend for the Bayou Splash. I think LSU has kind of found its ground with Jonah ever since Blake Baker got comfortable recruiting him. Blake has a ton of ties out to Houston. He's recruited that area for a good amount of time. And I think they've just continued to chip away and chip away. Listen, I still think there's going to be a couple more hurdles to navigate. I don't think this is any sort of done deal by any means. I don't have a pick in at this point yet. It's been a fluid recruitment, but you have to like where LSU's position coming out of this last visit. Should be his last visit before he gets ready for his senior season. Again, multi-sport athlete, hard to find the right position, right coach, and do that not only in football but also baseball. I think LSU has a lot to be excited about as some competitors start to fall by the wayside as this August 24th decision gets closer.
LSU hasn't been the only in-state program that's had some nice news recently on the recruiting trail. There's been, as I mentioned at the beginning, a ton of commitments around the state as guys get ready for their senior or junior year ahead. A new addition to that Cajuns commitment class this past week, Jaden Gloston, a guy that had been recruited by some Power 5 programs. Texas Tech offered him early on after they saw his track times. He joins that secondary group in the 2025 class that we've talked a little bit about, Dez and company, and adding Brent Gordon Jr., the versatile defensive back that I love at Cecilia, Cam Riley, the multi-sport guy up there at Neville, another corner, and now Jaden Gloston in the mix as well. Thoughts on Jaden, what he brings to that class individually, and just the job that Dez and company in Lafayette have done recruiting, some reinforcements for that secondary from around Louisiana.
Yeah, you already know Jaden was lightly recruited by some Power Four teams, and he fits the bill as someone that could develop at one point into someone that could play at that level. He has side, he has speed. He's very sound in coverage. You see how he fares at U High, like he's very well coached. But someone that maybe just hasn't shined, isn't completely ready to maybe come in and compete in the SEC. I think it's a great get for Louisiana, being able to get him in the cornerbacks room. No rush to get him on the field. Let him, get into the action a little bit slower, and kind of dose himself in. And we also can point out Louisiana also trending for another great DB in state, Caleb Ricks. With the other guys that you point out, Brent Gordon, obviously one of the top performers at LSU's camp last month. That's a really nice group to keep in state. Again, obviously a lot of Louisiana flavor, which you'd hope for, which you'd expect. But a lot of players that have traits. We're talking about Ricks, obviously coming from NFL bloodlines, potentially being a part of that group. And then Gloston, again, coveted by P4 schools that thought he could develop into be a P4 player. So I like the early makings of DeZormo's class.
Yeah, and that's some guys that all there's sort of some differences of builds, and each of them has their level of versatility. I like the way that they all potentially fit, and including when you mentioned if Caleb Ricks potentially ends up a commitment out to Louisiana, and guys that also have a real nice knack for making some big plays on the ball, and coming away with some impactful takeaways. So I have been very impressed with particularly that position group, the work that Des and company have done in state, but nice job for the Cajuns this summer overall with what now five in-state commitments and 7 out of state, and all heading into the season. And look, we do have, I think, a little bit of time to give a shout out to Coach Rebo and company. I didn't know with the new LSU commit if we'd get to Nichols, but Nichols has done a phenomenal job recruiting in-state guys since Tim Rebo took over a few years ago. And they added another couple of notable prospects the last couple of days from Baton Rouge, and Alec Haynes, the linebacker from U High, and Amari Clayton, the wide receiver from Catholic High. 2 guys that have impressed us throughout their high school careers, getting some early playing time, and are now members of the senior classes, leaders of their senior classes heading into this fall. Alec Haynes and Amari Clayton bound for Thibodeau. I thought, some nice additions heading into August.
Well, this is the difficult part of our job, Jared, is, some players are just incredible high school football players. And that's exactly what Alec is. It's exactly what Amari is. Sometimes they don't have the measurables or the testing numbers to make it to LSU or Alabama or Georgia. But that doesn't mean that they're not impactful football players that are going to play impactful games on Saturdays. And what Coach Rebo has done for as long as I've been covering kids in Louisiana, and will continue to see, is he gets some of the best high school football players from across the state year in and year out. And that's why Nichols is asked Chase 4K competing for championships in their conference every single fall. Alec, for years, you and I trying to decipher what position he will ultimately end up on. Just a enormous, physically gifted high school football player that could play with his hand in the dirt. He could play standing up, great at sniffing out the run, can pressure the quarterback and drop back and cover. I think he's going to be a great fit at Nichols. I think he's going to dominate at that level. I think he's going to go berserk like the Tasmanian devil, and either standing up or with his hand in the dirt. And then Amari has been such a playmaker in the 7-on-7 setting, and for Baton Rouge Catholic, with all those different great receivers that they've had over there the past couple of years. He's big. He's 6 foot. He can go deep. He's a multi-sport athlete. You kind of see that. And I think he's going to catch a ton of passes in Thibodeau over the next couple of years. A really solid, really productive receiver for Catholic, a very dependable receiver, if not much more.
Yeah, he's a guy that he's had his moments certainly for the Bears, but I think a lot of his best football is still ahead for him at the next level. And I think it's a great fit for both of those guys to end up with Rebo and company down in Thibodeau.
That's what Tim Rebo does.
Finds good football players, man. Well, again, he's Sam Spiegelman. I'm Jarrett Roser. Appreciate him as always for his time. Y'all as always for watching. This is Louisiana versus all y'all's Recruit That Boot. Thanks again. See y'all next time.